Right. Hello, everybody. My name's Rob Durrell. I'm the director of the EPSRC and NERC-funded Centre for Doctoral Training in Offshore Wind Energy and Environment. I'd like to thank you all very much for dialing into this webinar instead of the football tonight. I'm sure this will provide to be much more exciting. In tonight's webinar, we'll give you a brief introduction to the Aura CDT. Just to let everybody know, we're recording the webinar tonight. We will email everybody a link afterwards so you can review anything that you might miss the first time around. Now, as you'll hear tonight, the CDT is a really unique research program in offshore wind, integrating scientific research at the interface between engineering and environmental science with continued professional development and training. The CDT itself is centred out of the Energy Environment Institute here at the University of Hull, and it reaches directly into our partner universities at Durham, Sheffield and Newcastle. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Now, we'll be joined tonight by several of my colleagues from across the CDT, who will talk you through different aspects of the CDT, including Nina and Jim, who are going to explain a little bit about the application process to this program and also the structure of the CDT itself. We're also going to hear from Peter Osborne and Will Coombs, who are with us to tell you a little bit about the PhD research within the CDT. And we're also joined by Isha Saxena, one of our current PhD students. At the very end, there will be time for a question and answer session. So please put any questions you might have into the chat as we go along. If we don't get the opportunity to answer all of your questions at the end, we will respond by email. Now, next, I'm going to hand over to Nina. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. It will give you an introduction to the webinar and to the CDT program.
Thank you very much, Rob. Yes, exactly. So that's what I will do, just to give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to do tonight. One of the things we really want to try and answer is why offshore wind energy is important and why we think that this is a fantastic CDT. Why is the research important that we do? Why is the industry engagement that we do so important? Beyond that, we also want to tell you a bit about what we teach on the CDT. So there's this postgraduate diploma year that you'll go through. We'll speak about our research, both in terms of the wider research topics that we cover, as well as specific student projects, just to give you an example of what existing students are already working on. And then we have the Q&A and the panel discussion at the end. So if you have any questions along the way, if you can pop them in the chat, we'll get to them. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we'll start with a video about the Aura CDT.
The Aura Centre for Doctoral Training is your opportunity to make a difference. To tackle the challenges facing the offshore wind industry, to choose your own research path and kickstart your career, and to help create a sustainable, greener future for us all. The Aura CDT offers fully funded PhD scholarships to 75 students over 5 years. Starting in September of each year, new students join the cohort whose strengths come from the diversity of academic and working backgrounds, coming together to create a supportive learning environment. The Aura CDT draws on the expertise of leading academics from our 4 partner institutions. The centre is led by the University of Hull's Energy and Environment Institute, located in the Humber region at the heart of the UK's energy estuary. The Aura CDT works across 6 research themes with a unique dual focus on the engineering and environmental challenges. The broad range of research themes means we can offer funded scholarships to people from diverse academic backgrounds. We actively welcome applicants from all STEM subjects. We already have students researching in areas as diverse as wind and wave analyses to motion sickness in our offshore wind operatives. At the Aura CDT, we have made a commitment to train our students to be the future leaders in offshore wind energy and the environment. As an Aura CDT student, you will take a training year along with your cohort where you will develop skills that extend across the boundaries of engineering and environmental sciences. Knowledge at the cutting edge of engineering technology, and understanding of the life cycle of an offshore wind energy development, from conception right through to decommissioning. Tapping into the expertise of our partners, the training year is delivered by both our academic and industry colleagues. Following the completion of the postgraduate diploma, you will move on to a 3-year PhD research project. The learning journey continues throughout the full 4-year programme. At the Aura CDT, we value the student voice and strive to create a supportive environment. We are committed to creating a sustainable future for the global offshore wind industry. Join us and make a difference for yourself and the planet.
So hopefully that gave you a picture of some of the aspects of the Aura CDT. And I would just like to talk through some of the details around that. But before doing that, I'd just like to kind of put this in a little bit of context of the opportunities that the offshore wind industry has at the moment, and how we've designed this programme to address those opportunities and those challenges. So, as many of you will know, offshore wind has grown very quickly over the last 10 or so years, but really it's only just at the beginning. The opportunities in the future are huge, going from the current installed capacity of about 12 gigawatts of offshore wind up to about 50 gigawatts by the end of this century, sorry, the end of this decade, so in 8 years. And that involves lots of big challenges around manufacture, installation, and the environmental impact. And because of that big opportunity, but also those big challenges, we've designed the programme to kind of give CDT students the core skills to address those challenges, to work in teams, and to understand the broad aspects of offshore wind. So the way that's played out is in terms of the structure of the programme is around 75 core studentships over 5 years. So we currently have about 50 students already on the programme, and we'll be recruiting a further group for this coming year. The first year of the programme is taught in Hull as a cohort activity. So all of the students in that cohort are studying together, and we'll talk later about the areas that it covers. But it covers the environmental aspects, the engineering aspects, but also develops the research skills and training that you need to be successful in completing a PhD. Once you've completed that year, then you would move to one of the 4 partner institutions, Hull, Sheffield, Durham or Newcastle, to follow your PhD programme. But typically you would come back to Hull or to joint events, so you stay in touch with your cohort, but also benefit from the other cohorts who are already further on in their PhD studies. In designing the PhD topics, we've been very conscious of understanding the challenges facing the industry. We work very closely with industry, and so understand the future challenges that they're going to face, and that helps us make sure that your PhD work is really relevant, not just as a standalone research project, but something that can really impact on the wider industry. Quite a few of our projects are directly funded by industry partners, addressing a very focused piece of work, but also for those who are on more general core PhD studies, then there are opportunities for placements with industry, typically around 3 months to really understand what it's like working in the offshore wind industry and sharing your knowledge with those industry partners. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the structure of the PhD, and we'll talk about some of the elements a little bit more in detail later on. If we could just go to the next slide, please. One of the key things about the whole PhD CDT experience is that it is bringing together lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds and finding the extraordinary in each of those people. each student within the CDT has different skills, different backgrounds to bring together, and bringing those together really strengthens the cohort and helps everyone understand the wider aspects of offshore wind energy and the environment. Next slide, please. So I'll hand over to Nina, who can talk about the actual application and selection process.
Yes, thank you very much. So this is a picture of some of our current cohort. We run an Aura conference every year where everybody gets to see what everybody else is doing. So that's always really nice. One of the things that we really care about in Aura is equality, diversity, and inclusion, and that is as a fundamental element of our application process as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the URL, obviously, where you can apply. One of the things that we do when we evaluate applications is that we ask you to not include any personal information. So that would be names, gender, background, your country of origin, all of these things we ask you not to put in, so that we avoid any type of bias that could creep in while we evaluate applications. So that's one of the things that we do to ensure we have an equal, diverse, and inclusive cohort. When you apply this year, you will see on the website there's a list of projects that we currently have open and that we want to recruit to. On your application process, on your application form, you can list up to 2 project choices that you would like to be considered for. Download the application form, submit that form, and upload any transcripts and certificates alongside that. Then next slide has the remainder of the application process. So eligibility, a first-class undergraduate degree, or a 2-1 undergraduate and a master's degree. That's our current academic eligibility criteria. We do then do a double-blind sift. We assess any written applications on subject knowledge, specialized skills, and written communication. So there's a number of reviewers that look through all of the applications and rank them, and then we'll decide who to invite for interview, which are normally the highest ranked applications. You will then have an interview at your potential host institution. So depending on what project you applied for, that would be that institution that is going to host the project. And that normally includes a 5-minute presentation where you tell us a little bit about your background. We'll give you a specific title at the time, but that is normally what happens. So you'll present for 5 minutes, and then we'll ask you questions to assess further your fit to the project and the CDT. Next slide, please. Yes, so that's me again. Jim's already mentioned the PGDip, the PG Diploma on Offshore Wind. So that is the first year that we ask everybody to, well, we require everybody to take. So since the strength of Aura is that we combine all of these different disciplines, we recruit people from very different backgrounds. So we have psychologists, natural scientists, we have chemists, computer scientists, many engineers. And the thing is, we want to get everybody up to speed with the offshore wind sector, with the offshore wind area in general, but also with each other's disciplines. So at the end of it, we want people to know a little bit of everything. Essentially, that's to do with offshore wind, and also develop soft skills around communication, around collaboration. So we will see in the PGDip, there's a big focus on teamwork as well. And we want you to be able to work and also communicate across disciplines. So that's another part, how we develop the diversity of the cohort, how we develop strengths out of it. And we see it very, very important also to develop the capacity to take on different challenges, to take on interdisciplinary challenges that arise in the sector. That is what you see now. Is there are 3 trimesters that you'll go through with different modules that you take. So in the first one, you see the data analysis and visualization. That's a very computer sciencey module, but you also take offshore wind energy, which discusses some of the broader challenges in the sector and contemporary research issues. So all of that should give you an initial outlook on what we can do. The second trimester focuses more on materials and manufacturing and human factors, so two different but very complementary aspects to the sector. And then the third trimester looks into outreach and public engagement and a literature review. As you'll have your project from the start when you join us, you can start working on the literature review along the way, but trimester 3 is the one where we really encourage you to start on that, engage with your supervisor, engage with your host-to-host institution, and really, start your PhD in that sense. You will see along the way there are also residentials, there are internship opportunities, and there's a lot of networking involved as well, so that you get a really good flying start to your PhD. Next slide, please, I think. Oh, yes. I'll hand over to Pete now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. So obviously Nina's just given a good overview of the postgraduate diploma that all of the students take part in their first year of the CDT. And I think really one of the strengths of the CDT is actually the breadth and the diversity of the research that's going on across the 4 institutions. So obviously the postgraduate diploma is hosted in the University of Hull in the first year, but the CDT also brings together Newcastle University, Durham University, and the University of Sheffield. And it really draws on all of the expertise for the leading academics working on the subject of offshore wind and the environment across those 4 research intensive institutions. So next slide, please. And I think we've already talked about the breadth and the multidisciplinary nature of the research that's going on. The CDT is actually quite unique in that it's funded both by the EPSRC and NERC, so it covers the full spectrum of engineering and environmental challenges. And it's been developed with the various stakeholders to serve industry needs. And as part of that, we have 6 core research themes that the projects fit into. And as part of the teaching and the training, we're really aiming to give all of the candidates and the participants a broad understanding of each other's subject areas. So those themes are physics and engineering of the offshore environment, operations, maintenance and human factors, environmental impact, marine biology and aquaculture, offshore wind energy integration, next generation materials and manufacturing, and big data, sensors and digitalization. And hopefully you can see there's actually a really broad range of different topic areas. But because the challenges associated with the scale up of offshore wind are so huge, we can't just think about any of those areas in isolation. We actually have to think about, well, how does my research area interact with all of the others? And I think that's what makes it really exciting. So if we go on to the next slide, I think next up we've got Will Coombs, who's going to be talking about actually some of the research projects and how they fit together.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. That's a really good introduction. If we could just move on to the first project here, really. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give you a flavour of the sorts of different research projects that we currently have going within the Aura CDT. Obviously, you need to have a look at the CDT web pages and identify the projects that are most of interest to you based on your background and previous experience and interests. But just to touch on the first one here is a PhD project being done by Niall at Durham University. And this is all about trying to develop new novel acoustic methods for monitoring the movement of sediments on the sea floor and trying to think about how these can potentially impact on buried infrastructure or infrastructure that interacts with the seabed, such as foundations, cables that we need to install to make sure we can transfer the energy from these offshore wind turbines back to land. And he's doing this using hydrophones, basically. And so here's an example of a student who's developing sensors in the lab initially, and then looking at deploying those in field scale to monitor these large-scale movements of sediments. If we move on to the next project, which has been done at the University of Sheffield by Rachel, this is a very different project. So this is looking at how energy storage can be integrated within the offshore wind turbine structures themselves. So one of the criticisms of wind energy in general is that it's good when the wind blows, it's less good when the wind doesn't blow. So we need to develop not only the wind turbine technology, but also means of storing that energy, leveling out the energy produced to match with the demand, etc. And Rachel's project's all about if we can integrate this storage actually on site rather than having that, say, back on land, and particularly focusing on floating installations. And she's evaluating different options and making sure that there's also the cost benefit, the kind of return on investment analysis alongside the engineering technology, which needs to be sound. So even within that one project, it cuts across a number of our different research themes. And if we move on to the next project, which is being delivered by Ethan at Newcastle University, again, this is very, very different. It's looking at multi-use sites. So one of the things about development of offshore wind is we need to make sure that, or all the developments need to make sure that they're demonstrating environmental mitigation. And one potential approach to help here is to look at using these wind turbine sites where we already have a lot of infrastructure in place to do other things. And Ethan is looking at if you can use them to look at macroalgae aquaculture production, and really trying to determine which sites that are being used for offshore wind farm developments would be suitable for this and which sites would not be suitable, and also understand the impact of these sites on the biodiversity of the environment around the wind turbine developments. And the final project I want to touch on in particular, if we move on to the next slide, which is being delivered by Isha, who's actually just started at Durham University. And I wanted to highlight this because Isha's on the call with us this evening. And this is all about trying to improve the planning for offshore wind farms using data-centered techniques. So developing more sophisticated methods to model and optimize the planning, and not just the planning, but the operations side of things of offshore wind farms. So for example, can we predict when failures are going to occur in critical components and intervene early rather than waiting for those failures to occur and then having to have delays while we repair the infrastructure itself. So those are just 4 projects that give you kind of hopefully a bit of a broad idea of the sorts of PhD research that our students are currently doing. But I really encourage you to have a look at our web pages and look at some of the other projects, and also obviously the projects that we're advertising for recruitment as part of this round. So I think we can move on to the next slide, and I'll pass back over to Jim.
Thanks, Will. So I'll like to talk a little bit about industry engagement in the CDT and some of the benefits that that brings to the CDT students. When we first established Aura, we spent a lot of time talking to our industry partners about the kind of challenges that they would face and the kind of things where we could help. So obviously academic research can't solve all of industry's problems, but we want to focus on things where we can really make a difference. And that's led to them sponsoring PhD projects with us, which I'll talk about in a moment. But also they see the benefits of interacting with us in other ways. So we have secondments into industry so that people can spend time both understanding the needs of the sector, but also sharing their thoughts and their skills and their research outputs with industry to see that actually having an impact on the way industry works. Access to facilities and equipment. You know, the offshore wind business involves some huge structures, and no university has got access to some of the kind of scale of facilities that are involved. So being able to access those with our industry partners is really key. And similarly, getting access to data. You know, wind turbines, although they're kind of, you know, essentially mechanical devices, have huge numbers of sensors and collect huge amounts of data that we can't replicate unless you have a wind farm yourself. So being able to access data that our industry partners have at their fingertips really helps us make sure that our research is relevant to what they're doing. Some of our PhD projects will have industrial members on the advisory board, making sure that the PhD stays focused on the real industry issues. And also that's, again, a route to getting the results out into industry partners. And we have industry lecturers coming in and explaining some of the work that's involved there. So for instance, in the bottom right is Andrew Elms, who's the UK lead for Siemens Gamesa, talking about the blade factory in Hull and some of the challenges that they face in scaling up wind turbines to the scale that they're currently looking at. Next slide, please. So just to drill down into that a little bit, I'd like to talk about this project that Oliver's doing here at the University of Hull. And essentially it's looking at trying to improve the understanding of the blade manufacturing process. So modern wind turbine blades are over 100 meters long. The ones in the Hull blade factory have just switched over to 108 meters and then 115 meters. So huge structures, and they have huge amounts of material, and that's huge costs. So a blade maybe has £250,000 worth of materials in it. So you can't afford to make errors and have defects when you're manufacturing these objects. So what Oliver's working on is trying to use numerical simulation to understand how the casting process of a wind turbine blade takes place. So to understand the complex behavior of the resin involving the thermal behavior, the flow behavior, and how it interacts with the rest of the structure, so that we don't have to do too much repair work afterwards and finishing off. So the kind of work that Oliver does is, in the university, he's very much focused around computer modelling, but that's based on working with the factory both in Hull and in Denmark to understand the materials involved and to make sure that the work that he's doing fits into Siemens Gamesa's wider manufacturing and design process. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the kind of close relationship that we have between the students doing their PhDs and the industry partners that we're working with. So next slide, please. So you've heard a lot from us as the academics. This video will tell you something about how the students experience the CDT.
The Aura CDT is a PhD training program in offshore wind and the environment, when you'll not only become a subject expert in your particular discipline, but also get a broad education across all aspects that are relevant to modern offshore wind farms.
Hull is in the centre of the Humber Estuary, and the Humber Estuary is an absolute epicentre for all things renewables. It is known as the energy estuary. This means for you studying at the University of Hull, you'll also get the opportunity to really get out and see what this looks like on the ground.
There is no better place to research offshore wind than Hull. It's right in the center of offshore wind sector, with numerous wind farms located just off the coast and very strong connections with sector-leading industry, such as manufacturers Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy, who have their blade factory right here in Hull, or Ørsted, who operate the wind turbines from their facility just across the estuary.
Being within the Energy and Environment Institute has also been really great. Being constantly surrounded by so many postgraduate researchers and lecturers with such a broad knowledge base and a wide variety of fields. I look forward to completing my PhD and to having a career within the research industry and helping towards a more sustainable future.
We have been able to work with Siemens Gamesa graduate apprentices. They were in some of our lectures in our first semester. So working with them means that they were able to give us the practical application, and we could kind of give a little bit more of the theory, which together balanced well, and we were able to work very nicely together. We've also been able to pitch our PhD topics to industry and kind of tell them how we're going to be helping them, and they can then input in how they might be able to help us, whether it's through data that they have or any facilities that they may be able to give us to make our PhDs better and enhance the research that we are doing.
The demand for renewable power generation in the future will only continue to grow, and for you that means that the career prospects in this industry are always going to be in demand. All of these different aspects come together to be able to make this happen, and you could be one of those people.
All right, yeah, I can see it's me again. Thank you. Yes, this is really just a summary. We've reached the end of our webinar. We've told you a bit about what the CDT is about, what our research themes are, what kind of industry engagement we have, and also the teaching that we do on the CDT. So this part is really just to take any questions and discuss a bit more about anything that you want to know from us? Okay, so the first question, what sort of qualities are you looking for in a candidate?
Do you want me to?
So I think in terms of candidates for the CDT, obviously there's a wide range of projects being advertised this year for people to join. So there's particular skill sets that are needed for different PhD projects, and obviously applying to a PhD project where you have the relevant skills listed is the appropriate way to go. But overall, we're looking obviously for people who have a keen interest in renewable energy and environmental issues, and we're also looking for people who are keen to collaborate and work together and learn from each other. And that really is a fundamental part of the CDT itself, as you had discussed earlier on in the webinar. Jim, is there anything I missed there?
No, I was just going to say, I think there are obviously technical skills that you need specific to your PhD project, but it is that willingness to collaborate and work with others that is really a key part of it. One of the differences between a CDT and a standard PhD is this cohort experience, and so we really look for that willingness and ability to work with others.
I guess just to add to that as well, it's still a PhD at the end of the day as well, so we are looking for that desire to develop an understanding in your chosen topic area, and to develop that new understanding which is going to go on to solve the challenges of the sector.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that probably addresses the question, hopefully. We've got a question from Matthew. When is the next intake? So we're recruiting now for September 23. That is our next intake. We have a question from Rabina. Will prior experience in wind energy sector weigh in when selecting a candidate? I'll have a go at that, and then people can complement. I think it depends very much on your project. We're not expecting experience in wind energy specifically, but obviously we are expecting that you have some sort of angle that makes you a good fit for the project. So that could be in a background discipline, or that you have a skill set or knowledge that translate to the project and that are relevant to offshore wind. Anybody want to add to this?
Shall I just come in on that, because I teach the offshore wind module, the offshore wind energy module that's in the first trimester, and that really tries to give you a picture of the whole wind energy sector, from the technology, the environmental impacts, the business background that justifies offshore wind, and that doesn't assume any knowledge of offshore wind prior to starting it. So we assume that people won't necessarily have that background. Obviously, if you've got the background, then that first module becomes a little bit easier for you, but then other people will have strengths in other areas, and part of that first year is about bringing everyone up to a common level of knowledge across the different disciplines that feed into offshore wind.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Jim, if I might add to that, people working together and complementing each other's skills. So yes, you don't have to have experience in offshore wind energy, but you'll no doubt find strengths and share strengths with other people in the course.
Yeah, very good. Hussein is asking, is it possible for me to apply with a master's degree in environmental engineering with experience in coastal and sea environment? I think that sounds good. That sounds relevant as long as you can identify a project that requires that background and skill set. But that seems very much in scope. Richard has a 2-2 in materials and metallurgy engineering and is currently doing an MSc in mechanical engineering. Is he eligible with a 2-2 in his first degree? I would say yes if the MSc turns out successful. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, Nina, the entry requirements for the CDT are listed on the Aura web pages. So if it was just the bachelor's degree, we would expect a higher mark there, but it sounds like with the MSc, if that goes really well, then there's an opportunity to engage with this program.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What are the chances of those who do not meet the academic requirements but have the required skill set and work experience? I guess that is difficult because we do have the academic requirements, and yeah, it is difficult to get around that because.
Nina, I guess we always do talk about people being able to demonstrate transferable skills and experience. Yeah. So it's difficult to make a blanket statement, but what you would have to get across in your application is, well, what are the transferable skills that you bring from your work history that would make you suitable for a PhD in a more research focused environment. So it's probably not a definite no, but you definitely have to explain why you're a good fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree there, Peter. We definitely encourage people to apply, but definitely argue why they can within their application process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alice is asking if there are grade requirements for the masters.
I think there's a variety of ways that different universities do masters or grade masters depending on the subject and the topic area. So we'd definitely be looking for a pass. Obviously, different universities have different ways that they grade passes. So I guess it's probably another case of it's better to apply and tell us why you think you're suitable than it would be to well, assuming that that you have passed your masters, that you have nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm. There's another question. Can we apply for Aura funding to study the PhD during the master's course? You should apply for the PhD while you're still doing your master's degree, if that is what you're currently doing, so that you then have a smooth transition. So yes, that sounds a good idea.
So just to come in on that, I guess in that instance we would make a conditional offer that you would need to achieve a certain level within your master's. But yes, you should apply at this stage, and then that offer would be conditional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can one have an informal discussion with a project supervisor? I think that's something that we're not looking for because of our blind sifting process. And if you have an informal discussion with a project supervisor, it's very likely that they will be able to identify you after that. So we'd not encourage that, I would say. There aren't any categorical restrictions for people from specific countries.
Yes, we do. International students are more than welcome to apply to the CDT. Funding for international students is on a par with home EU students, which I believe is approximately £17,000 per year stipend for the 4 years of the programme. The fees are covered through the programme itself, so there are no additional fees on top for people to worry about, independent of where they come from.
I think the question here might also be around industry's funded PhD projects. So in the case of industry funded projects, then the industry partners would be part of the interview panel, so they would have input into it, but they're not directly employing people, so it wouldn't be a restriction on the international students applying for those roles.
Yeah, and to the best of my knowledge, none of them have applied any form of restriction on international students so far, so I would imagine that that would continue.
The only thing we do ask for from international students, I believe, is appropriate IELTS, which will be mentioned in the application criteria on the CDT website.
Yeah, just following in there, Rob, it's we need an IELTS or equivalent of 7.0 as an average, or as the overall score, and then no component less than 6.
Okay. Yes, there's quite a few questions now about specific degrees, if they're eligible to apply. We're not excluding any applications just based on the degree. So somebody's asking for physics, somebody else is asking for sociology. I think all of these applications are welcome as long as you can make yourself relevant to the specific project that you're applying to. Mature students are also very welcome to apply. There's no restrictions on that.
It's probably also worth pointing out, Nina, that we have a number of mature students currently enrolled in the CDT, so it's not only is it encouraged, it's part and parcel of the current cohorts that are taking part. So you would hopefully be one of several people who are more mature and are bringing your experience of the real world and industry to help solve the challenges that offshore wind faces.
Yeah, it's very valuable.
Yeah, Nina, could I just add in on these specific questions about particular backgrounds and things like that?
Yeah.
I think going back, almost flipping it back to the people that are asking these questions, I think what you need to do is kind of have a look at the projects and check really if you think your background and skills align to those projects. Because we are such a diverse CDT and we recruit people from all different backgrounds, we can't say, you know, yes, you can apply, no, you can't apply. Particularly the way that we're running the recruitment this year and that we're recruiting specific projects, you need to reflect on your skills, have a look at the projects being listed, the sorts of applicants that they're accepting, and do that necessary research to understand if you align to that project. But we certainly don't exclude anyone just based on what they've studied, but you need to make sure you have the skills to be successful in that research. It's, you know, you're setting yourself up to fail if you apply for something you have no background, and to be honest, you probably wouldn't be successful anyway securing that position. So you need to do a bit of homework yourself, I'd say, to people that wonder about specific combinations of qualifications. But if you're unsure, then probably follow up by email after the webinar.
Yeah. Just trying to see what other questions we have.
There was just a question about whether an integrated masters, an MEng would count, and yeah, that so an MEng would count as a master's level qualification.
LiDAR, I have a link with LiDAR.
So again, I think there we would encourage people to review the open PhD projects that are listed on the CDT webpage. There are a wide range of 20, 30 odd research projects that are seeking students that people can apply directly to and see where, as Will said, your skills map to those particular research projects where we're looking to bring new people onto the CDT.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. I mean, in case we're missing anything now, you're also very welcome to email us after at auracdt.hull.ac.uk, and we'll get back on that as well. I'm just sort of browsing through the questions now. Is IELTS important, or do we have to do the IELTS at the time, or can we do it later? So the IELTS.
Sorry,
yeah, go on.
I was going to say is yes, the IELTS are really important. Obviously, if you don't have the IELTS at the moment and you apply, it would be a conditional, and it would only be a conditional offer we could make.
Yeah, and it's also not just a requirement of the universities. I mean, it's a requirement of UK's immigration as well, that without the proof of English language ability to study on the course, you wouldn't be able to get a visa to come anyway. So it's not just a university requirement, it's a UK requirement to study with us. I noticed there was a question, I don't think we picked up on, which is about a deadline. Again, that is listed on the web pages, but it's the 4th of January next year for when this call will close.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I noticed that we've not had any kind of questions about what it's like actually to study. I wonder if anyone's got any questions for Aisha to answer, or whether Aisha would like to say anything about what her experience has been.
Yeah, so I have had a really wonderful experience. My first year was really good with Aura CDT. I think I met with a lot of people from different backgrounds, and the first year was mostly quite useful to know the overall industry and to get used to doing research and how to structure and how to write what I want to write. So I think it's a really great program, and I think it's a great scholarship, and everyone, the whole CDT is just amazing. So my experience has been great. Anyone who gets selected will be, I think, really lucky to be a part. So yeah. Also, I would like to mention that when I applied for my PhD, I didn't have to give the proof of IELTS because I was already studying in the UK for about 1 year. So in case you have already done your master's in the UK, I think your transcripts will be enough. But I think you still have to check with other people to know what the exact requirements are.
Thank you. I think that's really useful to hear as well.
I guess we have had one question about if people are wanting to list relevant experience, whether they should list their locations of that experience and the companies that they have worked for. I think we've had this conversation in the past, and obviously if it is relevant and it provides information about your experience, then yes, you probably should include it, even if that does indicate which country you're from, because it is more important that you demonstrate that experience. We have been back and forth on whether or not it's the right thing to do to blind that information or not, and I think we did ultimately decide that it is better to say where somebody had worked, because it provides that richness about your experience and your history. Obviously the flip side is it does give away where potentially you've worked in the past, but it's probably more important for you to get across your relevant experience than it would be to blind that information out and then lose some of that information.